Death has always been constant in human history, but not all deaths are equal. Some came quietly, a fading heartbeat, a last whisper. Others, however, were turned into spectacles. Acts of cruelty so calculated, so vicious, that they echo through centuries like screams that refuse to die out. There are those who wasted away under starvation and humiliation, like Prince Duet of Vietnam, locked in a wooden cage for all to see. And there are those crushed slowly under heavy stones, like Margaret Clitherow of England, a mother refusing to betray her children even as every rib in her chest cracked under the weight. Cruel? Yes, but as horrifying as these may sound, they are not the worst. There are deaths so drawn out, so deliberate, that many historians avoid telling them in full detail. Tonight, we will explore 7 of the most cruel deaths ever recorded in history. But before we begin, kindly subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts in the comments below, because this journey into the darkest corners of the past is one we'd like you to take with us. Now, when it comes to cruel deaths, one story stands apart. The death of Balthazar Gerard, assassin of William the Silent, a man whose end was so gruesome, so prolonged, that even the condemned himself must have begged for death long before the executioners were done. To understand Gerard's fate, we must first understand who he was. Balthazar Gerard was no common criminal. He was a devout Catholic, fiercely loyal to King Philip II of Spain, and in the eyes of Catholic Europe, William the Silent, leader of the Dutch revolt, was nothing short of a heretic rebel. Gerard believed that killing him would be an act of divine justice. On July 10, 1584, Gerard carried out his mission. He approached William at his residence in Delft and shot him at close range. The father of the Dutch nation fell, and the assassin was immediately captured. What followed next was not a simple execution. It was an orchestration of pain. The Dutch wanted Gerard's death to be an unforgettable warning, so they devised one of the most excruciating executions in history. It began with his right hand, the very hand that had pulled the trigger. Executioners took a red-hot iron and burned it until the flesh peeled back, until the bones themselves were scorched and blackened. But they didn't stop there. Next came the pincers. Red-hot tongs were pressed against his body, tearing away chunks of his flesh from his arms, legs, and chest. Imagine the hiss of searing skin, the smell of cooked flesh rising into the air. Gerard screamed, his voice echoing off the walls of Delft's prison square. Then came the mutilations. His chest was cut open, and before his eyes, his heart was ripped out. Some chronicles say it was still beating when it was shown to him. His head was severed, his body quartered, and his remains displayed to the public. This was no quick death. It was theater, designed to inflict terror, to carve the price of assassination deep into the minds of anyone who dared to defy Dutch independence. And as the crowd dispersed, one truth became clear. Gerard's execution had transformed a man into a grotesque spectacle, a memory no one present could ever forget. Ironically, the next cruel death belongs to the very man Gerard's victim would have admired, a freedom fighter himself. William Wallace, hero of Scotland, scourge of the English crown. Captured in 1305, Wallace was branded a traitor to King Edward I of England, but his punishment was not meant to be justice. It was meant to erase Scotland's defiance. He was dragged through the streets of London, tied behind horses, spat on by the crowd. Then came the hanging. His body dangled, choking, But just before death could claim him, he was cut down, still alive. What followed was a ritual of humiliation. His genitals were cut off, his stomach sliced open, and his intestines slowly pulled out and burned before his eyes. Every scream was music to the jeering mob. And then finally, the axe. His body was beheaded, quartered, and his remains sent to the corners of England and Scotland, nailed in public squares. It was not enough to kill Wallace. England needed to destroy him, body and symbol alike. Yet his death only made him immortal in the eyes of his people. While Wallace died as a warrior, Hypatia of Alexandria died as a martyr for knowledge. She was one of the last great philosophers of the ancient world, a mathematician, an astronomer, and a teacher in a city once famed for its library. But in 415 CE, Alexandria was a cauldron of political and religious tension. Christianity was rising, and Hypatia, a pagan intellectual with influence, was seen as a threat. One day, a Christian mob ambushed her. They dragged her from her chariot, stripped her naked, and hauled her through the streets. In the church of Caesareum, they attacked. Using tiles and oyster shells, they flayed her skin, tore her flesh, and left her body broken. What remained was burned. Hypatia's death was more than murder. It was symbolic. The violent silencing of science, philosophy, and tolerance. Her name echoes as a warning. When fear and fanaticism rule, wisdom becomes the victim. Centuries later in Russia, another brutal death unfolded, not of a single philosopher or warrior, but of an entire family. The Romanovs, once rulers of a vast empire, were prisoners of their own subjects after the Russian Revolution. Nicholas II, his wife Alexandra, their 5 children, and loyal servants were held captive in Yekaterinburg. On the night of July 16, 1918, they were told they were being moved. Instead, they were led into a basement. Armed guards entered and read out their death sentence. Without ceremony, the shooting began. But the room was small. The bullets ricocheted off walls. Worse still, the daughters wore jewels sewn into their corsets. The bullets bounced off them, turning what was meant to be swift into a nightmare. Screams filled the basement. The girls were stabbed with bayonets, shot again and again, beaten until they lay lifeless. The servants, too, were slaughtered. Blood stained the walls and floor. In that basement, an empire crumbled. A dynasty of 3 centuries ended not with ceremony, but with chaos, brutality, and horror. If Gerard's death was gruesome, Mithridates was slow. This Persian soldier was punished with a method called scaphism, known as the boats. He was trapped between 2 wooden shells, only his head and limbs exposed. He was force-fed milk and honey until his body rebelled, until diarrhea seeped beneath him. His exposed skin was smeared with honey, attracting flies. Day by day, insects burrowed into his flesh. Maggots bred in his sores. His body bloated, rotted, and decayed while he was still alive. Mithridates lasted 17 days before death took him. It was less an execution, more a living decomposition. Margaret Clitherow was a mother in Protestant England where Catholicism was outlawed. She hid priests in her home, a crime punishable by death. When arrested, she refused to plead. If she confessed, her children would be forced to testify, and the stigma would scar them forever. To protect them, she remained silent. The punishment was crushing, literally. She was forced to lie on the ground, a door placed upon her, and stones stacked on top until her chest caved in. Rib by rib, bone by bone, her body collapsed under the weight. She died slowly, suffocating, but without ever betraying her family. Centuries later, she was canonized as a saint. Her cruel death transformed into a story of faith and defiance. Finally, the story of Prince Duyat, once a high mandarin in Vietnam. Accused of treason under Emperor Tu Duc, he was not granted a quick death. Instead, he was locked inside a wooden cage, placed where all could see him. There he remained, denied food, denied water, left to waste away. His body weakened, his face hollowed, until only skin and bone remained. Each day was a public lesson. The humiliation was as cruel as the starvation itself. Prince Duyat's death was not loud, not bloody, but it was slow, deliberate, and merciless. From Gerard's searing mutilation to Wallace's public dismemberment, from Hypatia's flaying to the Romanov's bloody massacre, from Mithridates rotting alive to Margaret's crushing martyrdom to Prince Duyat's starvation, these were not accidents. They were performances of power. Each cruel death carried a message to terrify, to silence, to dominate. And perhaps the most chilling truth is this, that every one of these deaths was staged not only to destroy a body, but to etch fear into the memory of all who watched. Which of these deaths struck you the hardest? Tell us in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, because history is full of shadows, and we will continue to uncover them.